Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys, a former D1 Hooper, current high school coach, teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari for the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And Michigan State alum.
And Michigan State alum. I know you really want to talk Michigan State and Mel Tuck. I will say this, that game on Saturday against Ohio State is the first game all season I did not watch. Because there's some stuff going on, honestly, but also, I think at this point it's just clear that they've taken a very, very firm step back. So we're going to regroup over the offseason to see what happens. But as far as this season, it's probably not going to end that well. So we're just going to write this out and see what happens.
We did have a follower on Twitter that just said, please don't talk about this. Don't ruin my morning commute on Tuesday. So we will not. We will move on. But we're going to talk about Michigan State in a way before we get into our Pistons. And that's Michigan State alum Draymond Green. We are going to discuss just real quick. So if you guys don't want to listen to this, fast forward about 5 minutes. But this was kind of big news. And Omari and I thought we could have some good discussion. 2 different perspectives on this. So Draymond Green-Jordan Poole, obviously Jordan Poole, a Michigan alum, got into a scuffle. I don't know if whatever you want to call it. Draymond punched him. Everybody's seen the video by now. Omari, what were your first thoughts when you saw the video?
Yeah, I think it looked pretty bad. I think it's not uncommon for scuffles to happen in practice. You spend enough time around people, you're going to get on people's nerves. I think that's just part of life, part of sports, part of whatever. I think the type of punch it was very much like I am very much sick and tired of you. And I don't know what brewed beforehand that led to that moment, but it was clearly something was going on. Like it seemed like they had probably been beefing for a while. I think it's really hard to have discussions about those types of things on Twitter because I think personally a lot of people see things like that happen and then they use it as an excuse to talk about, well, I saw this happen when I played high school basketball. It wasn't that big a deal. And it's like, okay, well, we're not talking about, John and Deontay. We're talking about Draymond Green and Jordan Poole. So it's a little bit of a different level of scale. But I think the bottom line for me, like obviously Draymond's wrong. It's one thing to get into a scuffle. It's another thing to go for a knockout punch the way he did. A lot of people brought up the point that Jordan Poole should have did something to protect himself. And my point was, Draymond entered his space, and I think you have a right to push somebody who's in your space. But at the same time, once that push happens, you probably should protect yourself. You should be ready for something, whether it's dodging or whatever. You should, even if you don't want to fight, which I don't think Jordan Poole did, there probably should be some sort of, this is going to go down whether I want to tour or not, so I need to be ready. And then probably the last point for me is, people say it's not a big deal. It may not be a big deal. It might. There's times when you get into a scuffle, you move on, and we've also seen teams get into these types of situations, and it could derail chemistry. If 2 of your core players are actively beefing throughout the course of the season, that could be a problem. It may not be, but it could be. So I don't want to sit here and act like it's not a big deal because it is. But the other thing, too, is a lot of people had an issue with the Golden State Warriors not liking that the video went public. A lot of people were like, they're trying to hide it, dismiss it, this and that. And I'm all for transparency as a reporter, but from Golden State's perspective, I also understood why they didn't want that video to get out because it becomes a much different issue when you have a player becoming publicly humiliated. And I would understand just from the standpoint of we want Jordan Poole to not have to deal with this publicly. You would not want people to see that video. So I kind of see all sides. Bottom line, Draymond, you can't punch your teammate like that. You could have broke his jaw like that. It could have been a lot worse than it ended up being. Maybe they'll move on. Maybe they won't. At the end of the day, people like watching fights. So people on Twitter act like they're cool. They saw this stuff growing up and you're like above it. Stop being that way because anytime 2 NBA players fight, it's going to be a big deal and we deserve to talk about it. like I think that's what bothers me the most when people are like, this isn't a big deal. It is a big deal. Like, let's not downplay it. Like, it's a big deal. But 2 NBA players fight and it's like in the practice, like people are going to make it a big deal. Like, I don't want to make it seem like it's just something that happens because it's not a regular occurrence. It doesn't happen every single day. It's still pretty rare. Yeah.
So, Draymond was in the wrong and you're right. It is a big deal. And it's obviously going to cause some chemistry issues. I don't think it's impossible for these guys to come back from this as much as people think it is. And I know it's crazy to think that Draymond could, knock Jordan out like that and they still can be teammates this year. But I don't think it's impossible. I've been around fights as a player in college. And I've seen teammates, like sometimes it needs to happen, Omari. And I'm not condoning it. Draymond was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. He shouldn't have taken it that far. But sometimes these boil over to a point where like this is just what happens. And like I've been in scuffles I wasn't proud of, Omari. Like I was in a scuffle with my head junior college coach. Like I feel like people think I'm a nice guy, a good person. And he was scrimmaging with us one day. We were losing and things were unraveling, and he jumped in the scrimmage and we got for a loose ball, and he kind of walked up on me and I shoved him off, and I got ready to leave practice and my assistant coach grabbed me. And like, I love the man to this day. We talk all the time. I was just at his daughter's wedding this summer, and I know it's not the same scale. When you throw a punch, it's a little bit different. But I do think it's possible for them to come back from this. Draymond was obviously and absolutely in the wrong. It is going to be hard to do so. The leak is crazy to me. And I think to transition into the Pistons, Omari, I think it speaks to, like, for my 2 years around the team, and you can speak to this, you've been around the team for the same amount of time. I feel like nothing gets out of this organization. Troy Weaver, Dwayne Casey seem to run a very tight ship where I can't imagine it's been all sunshine and rainbows the last 2 seasons, Omari. And I feel like nothing has come out of that locker room, out of this organization in terms of people being mad or players beefing or anything like that. And you know it's happened a little bit.
I think they have kept some stuff under wraps, and they not necessarily had a situation where you have a player as prominent as, a player who's been a part of 4 championships in the last 8 years getting involved in something like that. But I agree, like, stuff happens. People were comparing it to, like, if you're in the office and somebody punches you or whatever. But that's a little different. Like, it's professional sports. I mean, stuff's going to happen. I will say, if they had gotten into a fight in, like, the heat of competition, like, let's say Draymond set a really hard screen and then Jordan Poole shoves him and then they had already been beefing and then it kind of boils over. I get that. I think when both guys are on the sideline and the video is silent, so that's the other thing for me, was like we couldn't hear what was happening, and there's obviously a lot more to it that we couldn't see, so I don't like to speculate a lot. But just the fact that they're on the sideline and Jordan Poole is not even looking in Draymond's direction, and Draymond very deliberately walked up and Jordan Poole stopped looking at him, and then Draymond gets in his face and Jordan Poole has like a get off you punch, and then Draymond punches him while guys are scrimmaging on the court. I think that's a little different just because it was not a heated competition thing. It was I'm ready to hurt this dude type of thing, regardless of the stakes or whatever. I thought that made it look a little bit worse than normal. But it does happen. It does happen. NBA players fight. When I covered the Grizzlies, Omri Caspi and Garrett Temple got into a locker room fight. And I remember sitting at a press conference waiting for JB Bickerstaff to talk. And we waited for like 15 minutes, like, what's going on? And then JB came out looking like he had just goaded his kids for like 30 minutes. And then report comes out, Omri Caspi and Garrett Temple get into a fight. And like, that was a big deal. But I will also say that team was like at the tail end. They started off pretty hot. They fell off. That was Jaren Jackson Jr.'s rookie year. They traded Mark Gasol that season, and they traded Mike Conley that offseason, and then they drafted Ja. So that happened towards the end of a team that was losing, had chemistry issues. You get into a fight, and then the front office is like, all right, like, it's time to wrap this up. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of stuff happens in the NBA, but I think it could be a situation where they move past it, but we also just saw a Utah team get broken up this past offseason because their 2 head players really couldn't get along. That wasn't the main reason. It was also because they didn't have the playoff success they wanted. The chemistry issues do throw teams off. So really, it's just a matter of, will this be that situation, or do they actually squash it and move on? Because I think once something like that happens and now it's public, it's become a very different beast than it was before we saw the video.
It's no longer in-house. They can't handle it eternally. And now everybody's on the outside giving their perspectives on it. So let's move on. Let's get into the Detroit Pistons stuff. We've seen 2 preseason games now, Omari, at time of the recording. Just in general, what do you think we can take away from these 2 preseason games and preseason games in general? Because I know Pistons 2 losses, Omari, and Pistons fans are worried. Cade maybe hasn't looked as good as they wanted. Sadiq didn't play well in the first game. So as we get into this, what kind of things can we say, hey, this is what we can really take away from these games? And this stuff, guys, like, just don't worry about it right now. It's preseason.
It is preseason. I put this in the story last week, but the season the Lions went 0-16. They went 4-0 during preseason. So I see the preseason struggles, and I'm just like, it doesn't mean anything. The Suns lost to a Australian team, and like the Suns, they have their own issues, but that still doesn't mean you lose to that type of team. So preseason's preseason. You're working the kinks out is fine. I would say that I think that just what stands out to me is players have not shot the ball well. I mean, Sadiq's not shot very well. Cade, he went 4 for 8 Friday, but previous game he didn't shoot very well. It's tough. Like, I don't want to like make a big deal out of the preseason stuff, because like sometimes teams struggle in preseason and then the light turns on and they're under the lights and you see a different level of play. I've been paying more attention to just what are players doing differently compared to last season. I think Killian playing more aggressively stands out. You had a pretty good game Tuesday. Friday, shots didn't fall, but just him making a point to get into the lane. He has like a little bit of a lefty hook shot we didn't really see a lot last season, and like I actually like that he added that.
Through Zion, Omari. Like, I know Zion's not like this big-time defensive stopper, but he's a strong man, and he played through that contact on the drive.
He did, and Killian is a pretty big, like 6'5" dude, so I think to see him being willing to get into players' bodies like that and finish is a really good sign. He also likes to operate from the short mid-range, which I don't think is inherently problematic. I know the Pistons have talked to him about getting all the way into the lanes. You can make the defense commit, draw a foul, yada, yada, but you still do need that short mid-range shot. And if that lefty hook is something he can hit consistently, and I think that's really good for his development. So I like what I've seen from Killian. Even if shots didn't fall like they didn't on Friday, you want to see him get into the lane and be more aggressive. And Jaden Ivey's been great. Like, he had 7 turnovers on Friday, but I thought for the most part they were fine turnovers. Like, maybe he was too aggressive on some drives. Maybe he mistimed some passes, but for the most part, defenses are committing to him when he gets into the lane. He's drawing 2-3 defenders every single time. I think his jump shots look pretty good. I think his vision as far as just finding open shooters has been good. And he has been as fast and as athletic as he was advertised. And for the Pistons, I think that's really good because Jaden Ivey has not really had, since Summer League, a moment where you wonder if the moment's too big for him. Like, he looks like he belongs. And, we've talked about it on the pod. He has some question marks as far as his playmaking and shooting. But overall, I've been impressed with what I've seen by Jaden. I think he's looked really, really good. And I'm probably a little bit higher on his ceiling as a rookie than I was this time last week, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. Somebody asked me on Twitter, Omari, what has he done that you didn't expect? And my answer was, not to kind of toot my own horn, but he's been exactly what I thought. I thought he was a good passer, Omari. I thought his passing was over criticized. He doesn't have to be a high level read guy because he gets into the lane. I think what has surprised me is that he's been able to do it at the rate he has this early. I know the season hasn't even started, but this early in his NBA career, right? Like, he's finally playing against NBA guys, and the speed, the first step in transition, in the half court, he's getting feet in the lane and he's getting opportunities. He's gotten to the free throw line 12 times, Omari, and he's 12 of 12 from there. And I know there's a lot of people that believe free throw percentage is an indicator for long-term shooting. So if you subscribe to that, you really have to believe in the jump shot. It's been a little bit of a mixed bag from three. He's 2 of 7, so, not a ton of volume there. But he's 8 of 21 overall. He has 8 assists. He has, I think he leads the team in points with 30. He did have the turnovers. Turnovers have been an issue for the entire team, Omari. And some of them have been of the aggressive type. Some have been passive. It is preseason, so hopefully they'll grow from those. But he's by far, for me, been the best player for the Pistons thus far. I love everything I've seen. And we may be eating our words about what our projected stat line was for the young rookie.
We may be. If we said it last week, if we eat our words on it, then we'll just eat it, and that'll be that, because that's a hard projection to make. Shout out to whoever set that line at 38, because that was a very good line for Cade and Jaden's combined points per game. But he's looked good. You make a good point about, his passing. He doesn't need to be a Chris Paul type of passer. I think a lot of times with athletic guards, they tend to not be those types of passers. But Jaden, with his first step, the way he gets into the lane, and his passes have been on time and on target for the most part. Like, again, some of the turnovers on Friday were a little sloppy, but I didn't see anything that was, like, worrying. He wasn't trying to nutmeg guys or anything like that, right? It was just, I think it was just stuff that you kind of work out through game action. But he's been good. I think the 9 free throws are a great sign. He shot, I think, 2 for 12, but for him to get into the lane and still crack double digits, still get some good looks from the free throw line is a great sign. I think his jumper looks fine. He shot 1 for 6 on Friday, but jumper's fine. I think it'll be okay. He may not shoot better than 33% as a rookie, but I think long term, I feel pretty good about the shooting. He shot pretty well at the line. Like you said, he's had 12 attempts. Like, he's been good at the line. I'm higher on him. I'll just say that. I mean, he's 6'4". He has a good wingspan. Defensively, it's been a mixed bag, but again, he's got all the tools to be a change of pace defender. And over their next 2 preseason games this week, I think I want to see Cade really have a Cade Cunningham game so we could see how Jaden Ivey plays off of that, because we have not really seen Cade have that type of game yet. So I feel like we're evaluating Jaden in a vacuum because his teammates haven't been that good. So he's probably have to carry a little bit more than you would want your rookie to have to carry.
So let's sit there on Cade Cunningham. He's played 48 total minutes through 2 games, Omari, and I pulled up his per 48 minutes stats from his rookie season. He averaged 24 field goal attempts. He's only taken 20. He's taken a couple more threes. He's only taken 1 free throw attempt in 2 games. 8 points less than what he averaged per 48 last year. Actually, a few more assists and about the same turnovers. I feel like Cade Cunningham is kind of just chilling right now. I don't feel like he's being super aggressive. And I don't even care. Like, I don't care if Cade is saying, hey, let Jaden Ivey get used to this. I think Sadiq Bey has taken the most shots on the team. Let him try to get off. Killian Hayes, we'll talk about him in a second, is essentially tied for the second most attempts. I'm fine with that. Have you got that vibe from Cade Cunningham? Have you heard anything like maybe Cade just letting everybody else do their thing, and then on opening night here in 10 days or so, we'll see the Cade Cunningham we're all expecting to see in his sophomore season?
So we talked to Dwayne today about Cade, and by today I mean Sunday, recording this Sunday night. And he praised Cade. Like, he said Cade's not forcing the issue too much. He's taking good shots. He's not, I don't think Cade's really asserting himself as much as maybe some people want to see, but it's preseason. Like, I just get the sense that he's easing his way in, and we'll see if he turns up the volume a little bit over these next 2 games. But I just know just from being on Twitter, and you always have fans who are going to be a little reactionary to stuff that they're kind of worried about him, and I'm not worried at all. Like, some players, when it comes to preseason or open practice or whatever, like, they're not going to turn it up till the lights are on, and I just have no reason to think that Cade's not going to do that once the games actually count, right? I think this is very much players getting a feel for each other, just working out the chemistry issues you may have on the floor, just filling out tendencies and whatnot. I think Cade's passing has been fine. I thought he had made some really, really, really nice reads on Friday, and he'll be fine. He's Cade Cunningham. I don't think we need to ring the alarm just because he's been a little slow over these first 2 games. We know what he can do. He doesn't have to prove anything in preseason. I'm not worried about it. I'm just not. I think when we get to October 19th, he'll turn it up, and whatever worries people had during preseason will disappear, because he's averaging like 8.5 points a game right now. Like, that's obviously not going to be the case when the games actually start, so I'm not worried.
I mean, I would rather have a guy that gets it going when the lights are on than a preseason MVP or something like that. I could care less what these guys do in terms of that. It is nice to see, Jaden Ivey as a rookie. And then let's talk about Killian Hayes. It is nice to see if there's improvements in these guys' game. And Killian Hayes is going to be polarizing all season, Omari. It's not going to change within the fan base all year. There's people who think he should be starting. There's going to be people who think he shouldn't be on the team, whatever. I have actually liked what we've seen from Killian Hayes thus far, Omari. He's averaging more shot attempts per 48 minutes if you compare him to last season. He hasn't been efficient, but his assist numbers are good. His turnovers are about 7 in the 48 minutes, which is a little bit high, but I like what he's done creating. What I really like, Omari, especially in that Knicks game, he came out, he had a couple turnovers, had a bad miss, whether it was deflected or whatever, but he stayed aggressive. I really like seeing Killian Hayes stay aggressive. I like what we've seen from him. How do you feel about what we've seen from Killian Hayes in terms of his aggressiveness, his shot attempts, and those type of things?
I think for Killian, it's just been about setting the tone. And even though the efficiency hasn't been there, I think he has set the tone as far as what he wants to do in his 3rd season, which is just be more aggressive. If you have a lane to the rim, take it, get into the lane, take a shot. I missed that in-between game where he has like that little hook, he's at it. But just getting to the line a little bit more. I think he has some really nice finishes against the Knicks last Tuesday. And again, he's not getting a lot of help. Like, at the end of the day, Killian and Jaden are going to play off of Cade. And I think Cade not being super assertive right now probably doesn't help them as much. But Killian, he's been way more aggressive. Like, the threes he's taken some threes we didn't always see him take last season. We've seen his tweaked jump shot. I think his shots look more online, even if they have not been going in, which is a good sign. And again, we've seen what he can do passing-wise. We've seen what he can do defensively. And I've said this before, but I think as far as a scorer, we don't need to see Killian become Steph Curry. We don't need to see him become like a Devin Booker type or whoever. It's just keeping the defense honest. If you have a lane, get to the lane, make the defense commit, kick it out if it's there, or if not, finish the layup. Just take what's there. He's probably not ever going to be a guy who's averaging 16, 17 a game, but he doesn't need to be that. I think if he can average an efficient, 9, 10, 11, get to the line when it's necessary, knock down open threes, and continue to do the other things he's done. He's a rotation guard. He'll play good playoff minutes the whole 9. It's just showing that he can be aggressive enough to be that scorer if the team needs him to in any given play. And so far, I think I've been encouraged by what I've seen, even if, again, the shots haven't been falling.
So speaking of three-pointers, our God Beef Stew Omari. I'm sold, man. Like, we finally seen it in some NBA games. I know it's preseason. I know we're telling people not to like overreact to anything, but it looks good. I believe he's 3 of 8 in these 2 games. So he's taken 4 attempts per game. That may be even a little more than what I think he's going to do. That's maybe foreshadowing to my bold predictions at the end of the episode, but I'm sold on it. I'm actually moving on to the next part of what he has to be able to do, Omari, which is passing, attacking, closeout, those type of things. That's what I want to see from Stu now, because I think he's going to be able to pick and pop. I think he's going to be able to knock down corner threes and space the floor, which is huge for the possible rotations and lineups that Dwayne Casey can put on the floor.
I agree. And he's really committed to taking that shot. And we talked about it, like this was going to be the season where he really commits to becoming the floor spacing big. But his shot looks good. I mean, 3 for 8. If he shoots, like if that's the percentage he shoots all season, that is a successful season, and that's something to me. If he's averaging 4 threes a game, but he's knocking them down on about a 38% clip, that is fantastic. Like, I don't think you could really.
Did you do that math in your head? I had to pull up the calculator on my phone.
I haven't looked it up. It's 37.5%, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm sure people are listening like, duh, everybody knows what 3 divided by 8 is, but that was nice. Good.
All right, cool. I'm not like I always did. I was never good at math, but I could always do basic stuff in my head. And I think just from writing over the years, I just know what 3 for 8 is. Like 2 for 8 is 25, 4 for 8 is 50. What's right in the middle of that? 37.5. So that's kind of how I did it. No, I think he's fully committed to it. His jumper looked good at the end of last season. I think he went 11 for 18 over his last 8 games. And then preseason, he only played 2 preseason games. I think
Summer League, you mean? You're talking about Summer League?
Summer League. He was like 5 for 9 or something like that. Like, it was still good enough to where you're like, okay, like this is something I can carry over. So it's here. I think 3-point shooter Beef Stew is here. I think it'll continue into the regular season. And the shot looks good. I think, and we talked about it too, just from the standpoint of for this front court rotation to work, because the Pistons are committed to playing 2 bigs. Isaiah Stewart has to be that guy who is knocking down threes. And I'm curious to see how you feel about this, but I really did think on Friday that was a great example of why the Pistons want him to be able to shoot, because in games like that, you don't necessarily want him inside against guys who are just a lot more athletic or a lot bigger than him. You want him outside where you're making those guys defend him out there. And I thought we saw several players on Friday where it's like, okay, you don't necessarily want him as a road man. You don't want him having to score amongst the trees. But when he's outside, it just fixes a lot of issues in a very natural way that I think will pay dividends this season.
My pushback to people who are like, why are they forcing Isaiah Stewart to shoot threes just to match the other bigs? I'm like, that is part of it, Omari, but it's about Stu's game as well. Yeah. I think there's a much likelier chance that he becomes a consistent and valuable 3-point shooter than there is that he becomes a consistent and valuable player in the dunker spot. And that if I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, but that's like right off the lane on the baseline, Cade drives, Killian drives, dumps it off to him. He's just not super great in that area, Omari, because he's not super explosive. He's not quick off the floor. I actually did a breakdown for an article this week where I show it in my video. He's just slow getting into that. He doesn't anticipate those passes. He's not a huge lob threat. So instead of being in the dunker spot on those drives, now he can go be in the corner, knock down a corner 3. And it does then allow him to play with a Marvin Bagley III. Marvin Bagley can roll and there's not Stu there clogging the lane. Or Jalen Duren can roll and Stu's not there clogging the lane. It kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It helps the rotation, but even more importantly, it helps Beef Stew's offensive value when we know he provides such defensive value.
And he's also just, you look at his shot and the touch he has, and he is just the most naturally suited of all those guys to occupy that role. They tried to get Marvin Bagley to shoot more threes too, and we'll see how that goes. But I just think when it comes to instincts, I think Marvin is more suited to rolling, being in the dunker spot, cleaning up around the rim, and Isaiah just naturally will be a better pick and pop big. I just think that the way he plays, he's already a pretty good perimeter defender. It just suits his game a lot more naturally, and it'll pay dividends down the road. I think people see him as a natural big, and he's just not. He is not. I think in high school and in college you could play him that way, but in the NBA, he doesn't have quite enough pop and quite enough size to occupy that role. But you have players who can just get to that first, second jump so fast. Like Isaiah Stewart is not that type of guy. It's fine. In the grand scheme, it's fine. Doesn't have to be that type of player. And he will actually be more effective being a good three-point shooter in the long run than he will be being that pick-and-pop type of player. Because pick-and-pop players, you still need shooting next to them. If you're the guy who can defend the perimeter, rebound, and shoot, you can play next to everybody. So long-term, it just works way better. Like I think some people have this idea of Isaiah Stewart being more of a throwback, Ben Wallace, like you're doing all your stuff at the rim. He's not Ben Wallace. He's a very different type of defender. He's a different type of offensive player, and let's just let go of that right now because it's going to be way better for him and the Pistons in the long run.
I think that's the issue, Omari. They want him to be this rough and tough and just dominate the paint and not this 3-point, 3 or 4, 5 3-pointers a game. And it's like, it's okay. He can still be super effective. And, it's the Detroit thing. I get it. It's his body type. I get it. But let this man be successful at what has the chance to be most successful at. And that's being a stretch big. And again, it flows with the other bigs on the team right now. So I understand it. You look at him and you want him to be just this physical. And it's not like it's going to go away. And he's still going to get offensive rebounds. He's still going to do some of those things. He's still going to set highway screens at times. But it's what's going to be best for him, as you say, long term.
And that's why having Jalen Duren, I think, long term is such a great fit because Jalen's going to do all those things naturally. He's 6'10", 6'11", long wingspan, super athletic. And that's Jalen Duren's role. And you can play Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart together. And defensively, that might be one of the best front courts in the NBA defensively if everything clicks, or offensively too, because you're going to ideally have one of the best rollers and finishers in the league. And if Isaiah Stewart keeps trending in this direction, you have one of the best switching bigs who can also space the floor. And in the playoffs, that checks just about every box. So I'll bring this up again, but just think about Grant Williams and Robert Williams III with Boston and how good they are. And the Pistons really can't have their own version of that and check the same boxes and have the same upsides as well.
And we're going to get into Jalen Duren. We're going to get into some of his defense and the defense of the Detroit Pistons overall after this break. But before we go to this break, Omari, we did have a new rating and review, and I did want to touch on this one. So this came from McKelliff31, says, great content, audio quality, ? I've been searching for a quality Detroit podcast that isn't actually about the hosts like many are. Definitely checking the box for the Pistons. Awesome. And then critique. Can we improve Omari's audio quality? And I just want to, real quick, I just want you to know, this is how much we care. We spent all week trying to fix it, getting to the bottom of it. We were jumping on test runs on StreamYard. We just recently switched to StreamYard so we can eventually get this on YouTube. We were messing with the microphone settings. Wes and I, we emailed back and forth. We are all about quality. Thank you for the critique. We appreciate it, but I promise we're doing everything to bring the best product we can.
We are. Part of the problem is that I live in an area that has a very busy street, so sometimes when we record, there's people outside talking, and we're trying to figure out how to put my voice at the forefront and the background noises in the background. So I feel like we haven't had a lot of audio issues thus far, and this is episode 34, so hopefully we could get back to where we were previously. But we are trying to figure it out. Again, I'm not an audio expert, so I've been letting our audio producer, Kerry Jr. II, and Bryce figure this out because they're the experts. But hopefully this episode we have no issues, and we're recording at night, so it's pretty quiet outside. Fingers crossed. But again, we appreciate the review and the feedback, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to this short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Jalen Duren, switching defenses, and more.
All right, hey, Carlos, just a quick idea. How about if I say, hey, this is Sean Windsor, and you say, hey, this is Carlos Morales, and I'll go, and then we'll go back. You want to try that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Hey, this is Sean Windsor.
And this is Carlos Monarez.
And we are the team behind Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, sports, but lots of other stuff. Like what, Carlos?
Oh, we're going to talk about your favorite subject, Sean, food. Probably more food. arts, culture, sports, TV, movies, you name it. If it's happened in Detroit, we're going to talk about it.
And sometimes we're going to have guests in who obviously know a lot more than we do about just about everything. But we're going to have some free press journalists to talk about big stories, folks from the sports world. We're going to be out every Thursday. You can find this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We hope you'll join us.
All right, we're back. And I think one of the things about preseason that stand out the most, I said earlier, I don't think individual player performances mean a lot when players you know are good are struggling. But the rotation specifically, I think have been interesting. When you look at the fact that they start Marvin Bagley III and Isaiah Stewart together against the Pelicans, which part of that was matching up against Zion and Jonas Valanciunas, which could be the most punishing front court in the NBA when it comes to just guys who like to get into your body and kind of break you down. But I've been intrigued by some of the two big lineups we've seen, whether it's Isaiah Stewart playing with Marvin Bagley III or Marvin Bagley III playing with Jalen Duren or Isaiah playing with Jalen Duren, because we will see a lot of that this season. And it's interesting because the Pistons do have 4 bigs, and they're trying to work 3 or 4 of those bigs in on any given night. They want to find minutes for Jalen Duren, which I know people will be happy about that because he's the rookie. But I think we've seen some mixed results from these 2 big rotations thus far. And I definitely want to pick Bryce's brain on this one because I thought that the game on Friday where they're switching 1 through 5, an issue probably was not necessarily the bigs in that game, even though Marvin Bagley III did foul out in the third quarter. So there's some info there that we're kind of missing. But it's a juggling act that I think Dwayne Casey will have this season, and I'm curious to see if they're able to get a viable 2 big lineup by the end of the season, given that I think no matter what combination you have, you're giving something up.
So if they're going to play Jalen Duren and Marvin Bagley III together, I actually think you have to play Jalen Duren as the 4 offensively. I think he's the skill guy who you want making short roll passes, short roll reads. I know he's not a shooter to the 3-point line yet, maybe never. I don't know about that. I think he will have to 15 feet, but I don't think Marvin Bagley's that playmaker in screen and roll. So if you have Jalen Duren just standing in the dunker spot and Marvin Bagley III rolling, they're just going to end up on top of each other, clogging up the lane. I think you have to do it the other way. I think the only way that has to be successful is Marvin Bagley in the dunker spot or stretching to the corner maybe, and Jalen Duren being the roll man, and then possibly short roll making reads, because I am high on Jalen Duren's long-term passing. So I would be happy if they put him in there. That's part of my argument for him playing with the Cruz, Omari, is I don't think he's going to get those opportunities with the Pistons. If he's getting them with the Pistons, then yeah, he doesn't need to go play with the Cruz. What I am also high on with Jalen Duren, and I'm glad we saw, was his ability to switch. And I don't know. To me, it looks like they're going switch heavy again this season. I feel like this is something you can take away from the preseason. Maybe they haven't been able to get all their defensive schemes in right now. Maybe you guys have been able to ask Dwayne Casey this, or maybe you can ask Dwayne Casey this moving forward. But it looks like it's going to be a heavy switching scheme again. And I thought Jalen Duren held up really well in his one chance to do so. Obviously, he didn't play on Friday against the Pelicans.
So we did talk to Dwayne about that today. And Dwayne said they will give different looks depending on the opponent. It's not ideal, obviously, for Cade Cunningham to have to defend Jonas Valanciunas in the paint. And Dwayne did say we'll have different schemes where we're not going to want Cade on Joel Embiid, or we're not going to want Cade on Valanciunas. We don't have to switch 1 through 5. We can do 1 through 4. We can do 1 through 3, whatever it takes. And I think part of the problem, too, is that Duren is nursing a sore shoulder. So there's situations where you could probably see him switch. I'm curious to see how he would have matched up against Zion, for example, who has Zion is just a freak, man. Like, just his first step and his explosion. He's like Derrick Rose for like an offensive lineman. Along with Nerlens Noel, who, is a really good post defender. And he's also been sidelined during preseason. So we're missing some information, which I think makes it hard to really judge that rotation as a whole, because we've really only seen 2 guys in Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley III. But I like the idea of Jalen Duren being more like that 4 role, because one, it puts Marvin Bagley III probably in his best spot, which is the 5, because it keeps him closer to the rim defensively. I don't know if you want him on the perimeter. And he's not a great rim protector, but he's probably better at that than he is chasing guys around. And then 2, that challenges Jalen Duren to do some of the things that you want him to do long term which are all the things you mentioned, being able to make those short road passes, maybe knock down some mid-range shots here and there. I think the thing for me is for Jaden Ivey, that be a situation of running before you walk. Like maybe you want him to just be good at rebounding, defending his position, screening and rolling and dunking before you start asking him to like break down the entire defense and locate guys, right? Which maybe you just do it because throw him into the fire, why not? But I'm curious to see if they want to keep things simple for him, at least to start.
No, that's a good point. I will say I was a little bit critical of his defensive rebounding when I scouted him before the Pistons drafted him and then even after Summer League. And in that one game we've seen thus far, he actually defensively rebounded really well. And I was impressed. He ended up switching, getting stuck on guys on the perimeter. Shot would go up. And in college, if you go watch the tape, Omari, he would kind of just leak out towards the half court. He went in and attacked defensive rebounds in those situations, had a really good rebounding game, Jalen Duren did. So I'm excited to see more of him. I hate that we didn't see him on Friday. Hopefully that injury isn't anything super serious that holds him out very many more games. I do think we should mention here 35 minutes into the pod, Duren missed that game on Friday. And then Nerlens Noel and Kevin Knox, I believe you guys tweeted out, did practice on Sunday, and Hamidou Diallo did not. He's nursing, is it a quad or a hamstring?
It's a quad injury for Hami. So I don't think it's a serious injury, but it sounds like Hami's situation is a bit more serious than Duren's situation. We did see Jalen at practice today, and he just ran some sprints. Like he didn't actually practice today, but he was still out on the floor. Sounds like they're just being precautionary with that. So I don't know if he's going to play on Tuesday or not. So we'll just have to see. Still missing some info there, obviously. Yeah, we'll just have to see. Hami's still out, and I think it sucks for him, obviously, not being able to capitalize on Alec Burks being out. So that's also just a TBD at this point.
Yeah, so Alec Burks obviously out as well, not practicing. We haven't seen him play. I kind of wonder if he's in doubt for opening night, Omari. So
I think it's fair to say that because he's not going to be reevaluated until around October 17th.
Okay, that's 2 nights before, right? That's just 2 days before opening night.
And then even then, maybe he's full go then, but now he's just not getting back to practice. So maybe they give him a week to get acclimated before he steps in. So I'm not saying he won't play opening night. I'm just saying it seems like a realistic possibility that he may not make his debut until later in the month, depending on his recovery.
Okay, so to me, that changes what we've talked about. We've had all these rotation episodes, and then we traded for Boyan, who I just want to make a note real quick. Boyan is everything I thought he was going to be as well. Like, he shoots the ball, Omari. He's going to provide floor spacing, and he doesn't guard a lick. Like, I'm sorry. That's what everybody said. That's what I felt like when I did the film breakdown, and that's what we've seen in 2 preseason games. Maybe he'll gear up come the regular season. This is not me saying it was a bad trade. I'm not critiquing it, anything like that. I think his floor spacing is going to be more valuable than his negative defensive impact. I'm just saying he ain't guarding a whole lot of people, but luckily he shoots the ball really well, and that's something this team needs.
Here's the question. How many plus defenders will the Pistons have this year? Because I'm hovering around 2.
Isaiah and Killian.
Yeah.
Okay. No, both Isaiahs. Isaiah Stewart, Killian Hayes for sure, I think are plus defenders.
Yeah.
I think Isaiah Livers has an argument to be there, but as Wes often likes to remind me, we've only seen Isaiah Livers play 18 games. And so I have to be careful just automatically saying he's going to be. I think he's a really good team defender. I don't think you can say for sure Cade is. Ivy's going to be a negative this year. I'm sorry. I think Saddiq Bey is a negative defender right now. Boyan is. Bagley is.
Nerlens might be a plus, so that might give you 4.
But it depends on what scheme it is, Omari. Like, that's my thing. Yeah. That's why I didn't think it was going to be fully switch heavy this year. Because if Nerlens Noel is going to play and they're going to switch everything, that makes 0 sense to me.
The only big you want to switch is Isaiah Stewart. I think other than that, you want everybody else in the drop. Maybe you want to switch Duren to see what he could do.
And I would make an argument that Marvin Bagley may actually be better in switch than drop. Like, neither of them are very good, but he actually may be better in switch than drop.
Dwayne applied that today as well.
That he was better in switch?
Yes.
And it's crazy because he's such a good lob catcher, but he's not good in drop contesting lobs and those things defensively. And it is a different, like, it's one is backpedaling and one's moving forward to the rim. So it is different, but it's going to be hard to be good defensively this year, Omari. Like, Jerome Allen has his work cut out for him.
You just don't have the personnel. So no. I know people will, like nitpick here and there, and certain guys will get the job done, but it's just a personnel problem. Like, like they could make everybody stay home and not switch at all, but you still have issues. So It's kind of just like pick your poison. I think at least when you switch, I know some of the idea against the Pelicans is that you're giving up fewer threes and you're making them go inside, which you look at the stat sheet and like Zion and Valanciunas actually did not really have great nights, even though, you're making them take twos and those guys are really good at getting you good shots in the paint. But from that standpoint, it paid off pretty well. And the Pelicans took 24 threes and only made 8. So as far as giving up threes, it worked out pretty well. And they could have won that game. I mean, I think if maybe Bagley doesn't foul out and, maybe you're able to pull it off. But like you said, no matter what they do, they're going to have issues on defense because you maybe have 2.5 guys who can defend. And on the whole roster, you really only have 2 proven players in Killian and Isaiah that can thrive in a switch scheme where you can defend. I think Killian can defend 3 positions, and I think Isaiah can defend 4 pretty well, maybe 5, depending on the point guard. So.
All right, before we get to our bold predictions, though, I do want to get to where we were going with the Alex Burks stuff is assuming he doesn't play opening night, what is that guard rotation on opening night, Omari? So I know we both think Cade's going to start. Does Ivey end up starting next to him? I would say based off what we've seen thus far in preseason, he probably does. Killian's going to come off the bench. So then is it Kojo as the 4th guard? Does Isaiah Livers actually slide down and play some 2 whenever we've been talking about him being a 3-4? What would your prediction be on the guard rotation on opening night or until Alex Burks is healthy?
I think Jaden Ivey will stick in the starting lineup. I think he has shown his value. I think he has shown that he can be a productive player from day one. And just given that Cade and Killian also started, it's just, I don't know who's threatening Jaden Ivey's job. I think just what he gives you is not being replaced. So it's hard for me to see who would replace him in that spot. So my guess is that he'll stick. Killian, I think, will still lead the second unit as he did last year. He looked a little bit more comfortable in that role. And that's the way he likes to say. It's not about who starts, but about who finishes. So, I think Killian could still close games out if he's playing well, or if he's not, you could play Ivy or Corey or whoever else. But I think Killian will still be the conductor of that second unit. And beyond that, I think it is interesting because it could be Hami, but Hami's not played. So I'm wondering if they would want to see what he could do in practice a little bit more before they give him that role. It could be Isaiah Livers playing the 2. I think he's a lot better as a 4 than as a 2. I just think defensively he's better as a 4. I think just the rotations he makes, and you kind of want him on the back line, probably so to speak, more to say. They can mix and match. Like, I really am curious to see. I think it may be a situation where you have a lot of ball handlers and then you have a lot of bigs and you have a couple wings, but you probably just have a gap in like that 2 spot that won't be filled until Alec Burks gets up to speed, and maybe they just play some guys out of position until you get to that point. So you can do a big lineup. You can play Sadiq at the 2. You can play Isaiah Livers at the 2, Boyan at the 3, and then 2 bigs at the 4 and 5. I can see him playing a little bit bigger until they get Alec Burks back, because I don't know who else is going to fill that role like Alec Burks can, just being a true 3-and-D wing.
Well, you always got the pros pro, Rodney Magruder, that's always ready to come in, knock down shots, and do what the team asks. So they could go that way as well. We're going to go to a short break here, and then we're going to bring on the man himself, Wes Davenport, and give 3 bold predictions each for this Pistons season.
I'm Alyssa Robinson for the Detroit Free Press. When you wake up every morning, what's the first thing you do? Check your email? Me too. And when you sign up for our daily briefing newsletter, you'll get all the latest news sent directly to your inbox so you can wake up and be ready for the day. We also have newsletters about COVID-19 in Michigan, the latest entertainment headlines, as well as Woodward 248, a newsletter specifically for people living and working in Southeast Oakland County. And don't forget about automotive headlines and all the latest news from our Michigan sports teams. We have a newsletter for every personality and preference. Just head to freep.com/newsletters to sign up for any one of these great options and more.
All right, we are back with our bold predictions for the season. I just did a bold prediction story on Sunday, so I actually have 3 different bold predictions for this pod that I think are actually a little bit more bold. Like, my predictions on Sunday, I did not brand them bold predictions because I thought they were all pretty realistic and fair. I'm not good at hot takes, so I'm going to let you guys be the hot takers for this one, and I'm going to hope my takes are bold, but I'm not sure. Wes, I hope yours are extremely bold because the people want to hear you, man. Like, I'm excited. Make this one count.
This was Wes's idea, and this was hard because I'm like, I want to be bold, but I want it to be realistic. And so I was always having this internal battle of like not being too crazy with it. But if it's not bold, like then it's no fun. So I think we're going to go we're going to kind of snake this or round robin it or something. We'll figure it out as we go. But we're going to give one each and then kind of go around. So Wes, the man of the hour, you start us off, my friend.
All right, my first bold prediction. I'll say it's negative, but Sadiq Bey shoots less than 35% from three again. Just a gut feeling.
That was not a good start for you, Wes. The fan base loves you, Wes, and they no longer do. Welcome to the quote-unquote Sadiq Bey hate club or whatever you want to call it. It's fair, though, Omari. Like, it's fair. As good as we all say he is as a three-point shooter, he's been inconsistent. I don't think it's outrageous.
It's not outrageous, and I think like the first play on Friday, he had an open three, and he kind of passed it up.
Yes, they ran the set for him.
Yeah. And like that's like the shot you want, so that kind of surprised me. And Sadiq is in this place in his career where he's, he came into the league like three-point gunner reputation, shot really well in college, shot 38% for three as a rookie, and now he's trying to expand his game. And I wonder if like there's a push and pull for him. Like I don't just want to be this, so I'm trying to prove that I could do more. But three-point shooting is his bread and butter, so you got to take the open three. Like, there's just no reason to pass that up.
Yeah, I tweeted that clip out, Wes, and I was just like, they ran this for him. It was actually a nice little set to start the game from Dwayne Casey. He gets a good look, and then if he doesn't take it, then he should have drove baseline. That's another part of the story, but he should take every single open opportunity he gets. So, I don't know with Sadiq. I hope he shoots better than that, but I think it's a fair take, Wes.
Well, and I think last year he was a little over 34, right? I don't think he's going to be too much different because he's still, like you guys said, figuring his feel out for when he wants to put it up and when he wants to go. So I don't know, just a gut feeling on it. But
all right, we'll stay with 3-point shooting, and I'll go with our guy Isaiah Stewart. I'm going to say Isaiah Stewart takes over 250 3-point attempts this season. And for anybody who doesn't think that's a hot take, maybe you don't, that's over 3 per game. He's only taken 109 in his 2-year NBA career thus far. He only took 20 in college. So I think that would be a pretty significant jump for Isaiah Stewart.
I like it. I think I predicted in the paper that he would take 150, which if he plays 75 games, that's 2 a game. And I think preseason makes me think that he could definitely average more than 2 attempts a game.
Your math is on point tonight, Omari. For it being 10 o'clock Eastern time, you were crushing the math tonight.
I wish I crushed math in high school. I'm going to stick with the 3-point shooting. And this kind of goes hand in hand with Bryce's, but if he takes that many, then he'll probably do this one as well. I think he makes more than 100. So that would, I'm going with him playing around 75 games. So that's him making obviously more than 1 a game. Which would be insane because he's taken 109. So for him to go in from 109 attempts in 2 years to 100 makes in 1 year would be a massive transformation. But I think he could do it. Like, I believe in his 3-point shooting. I've seen how much work he's put into it. I know it's been a long time coming, and he's known that this would be his role for a while. And I don't think him making at least 1 3-pointer a game over the course of the season is out of the question. So my guess is he makes at least 100 this season.
Wes, before you give your second hot take, what are your thoughts on Isaiah Stewart's 3-ball? Because you haven't had a chance to talk about this on the pod.
yeah, well, I was a little skeptical just coming in, but after these 2 preseason games, it looked smooth. He looked confident in it. And it seems like Casey's giving him the green light. So, I mean, I could definitely see him getting up 3 a night, making around 1. It doesn't seem out of the question anymore. I'm almost expecting it too, which I would not have said just 2 preseason games ago. So it was pretty crazy.
I think the biggest thing I'm still interested in, what happens when he goes on a stretch where he makes 2 out of 20 or misses 10 in a row or something like that. Does his confidence wane, or does Dwayne Casey's confidence in him, change? I don't think it will, but that would be the one thing. If you get to a certain point, he's not, he's shooting 20% and they say, hey, let's shut it down for the season. But all right, Wes, let's keep this going. Give your number 2 bold take for the Pistons season. Bold prediction.
I will stick with Isaiah Stewart. I'll say, unfortunately, he becomes a bench pick this season. And I know that's a hot, but I think primarily it's because they want to get him minutes with Durant and they shift Bagley up so that he can start next to Bojan. So not a demotion, just to get a pairing going through the end of the year.
Omari, who is this guy with all these negative bold predictions tonight?
We said
Where's
bold.
the boo?
Boo. I like it because it's going to take heat off of us. So I'm actually rooting for it. Like I booed the first one, but then I thought they're going to be bad at West and not be at Bryce's episode. So I'm actually all for it.
Real quick, that is at the Real West D3. That's who you guys want to at on Twitter. You can put me and Omari in those tweets just so we can laugh while you guys are crushing him, but at the Real West D3. And you guys should follow him on Twitter. He does good Piston stuff along with Omari and I. So if you're following us, you should be following Wes also. But Omari, what do you think about that? Isaiah Stewart possibly coming off the bench at a certain point.
It's like, I guess in a vacuum, it seems realistic. I don't know who he comes off the bench for, because for what they want to do on defense, someone else could do what he does. And if he's also knocking down threes, I just don't know who supplants him. I think it is like, on other rosters, like it's certainly a possibility, but on this roster, I think Isaiah Stewart, if he's hitting threes, space on the floor, and also defending, like 2 through 5, 1 through 5 on some nights, who else is going to give you all of that? So I think it is in a vacuum possible, but for this Pistons team, I think his starting spot is pretty safe unless he shoots like 10% from 3 or something.
I don't need to speak for Wes. He kind of outlined why, but I think, Wes, if I'm not mistaken, you just think the combination of bigs makes more sense of Boyan and Bagley and then Stu and Duren.
Yeah.
And if you're going to start Boyan, you can't obviously start Stu and Duren also, but you want to play Stu and Duren together because that's your future front court rotation. And so I think that's kind of where you were going with that.
Yeah, and if you're starting Boyan at the 4, Stewart's not fixing the defense. Like, you got 4 bad defenders out there. Hey, I almost feel like you ought to just lean into all offense anyway. Let Stewart go off the bench with Duren. Yeah, whatever.
That's fair. I don't hate that. Yeah, that actually does make sense. You might as well just at least have more offensive chemistry with Cade at that point. Just put a loud threat out there. Maybe score 117 points a game and giving up 120. But
I was going to say, they're going to have to score more than that if they're going to win with that.
Yeah.
Okay, and I see that, I believe, Wes, you have one, so maybe Omari will have one that ties into this as well. So I have only one of Nerlens Noel, Alec Burks, and Bojan Bogdanovic get traded, and one of those guys gets re-signed in the offseason. So only one of those 3 actually gets traded at the deadline between Noel, Burks, and Bojan. I think guys who everybody thinks are probably getting traded, and I think at least one of them, Omari and Wes, gets brought back on a new contract next season.
I like that because I think it's realistic that maybe one of those players would have value as far as just the fact of, is it worthwhile to trade them? And if the Pistons are sellers at the trade deadline because they're out of the play-in race, which is a possibility. Yeah, maybe Alec Burks is the guy who has the most value. Maybe Bojan is the player that's like, we couldn't trade him because people are nervous about him being 34 or whatever it may be, but we can sign him on a cheap deal. He's a good locker room guy. He's going to shoot the ball well. It just makes sense. So I think it's not super bold. I think that's just actually pretty reasonable.
Oh, come on, man. I actually was reading mine. I'm like, gosh dang, I'm lame. None of mine are bold. None of mine are bold at all. These are boring. I'm trying to think of one on the spot now because my other 2 are so bad. What do you think about that, Wes? Do you think all 3 of those guys get traded? Do you think they all stay? What do you think?
I really like it. I could see 2 of those guys even getting re-signed. You figure Burks and Bogdanovic are probably going to play quite a bit. If they both play well, I could see them wanting to keep them around. They're good vets, right? And they shoot. I think totally possible.
And there's a lot of money next offseason, and I don't think you're going to spend $60-70 million just on outside free agents. So if Bojan wants a 2-year deal, maybe the Pistons, you don't want to overpay too much, but maybe you can, sign him to a 1+1 with a team option. It's a little more than what everybody else would give, but you got to spend some of that money anyway. And why not have, like you guys are saying, a guy that can really space the floor, that's been around the team for a year, and maybe at that point would be willing to transition back into the second unit. So I thought it was a little bit bold because everybody's already trading those guys at the deadline, but maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought I was. So Omari, what's your number 2?
Yeah, my number 2 is kind of random, but I had Kevin Knox will have a 25-point game.
That is kind of random. That's extremely random.
It's like, okay, so one, Dwayne talked about Kevin Knox being one of the, shooting the ball really well in this offseason of camp and whatnot. 2, there's always a lot of weirdness in March when, some players are shut down or hurt or whatnot, and different people go off. When I covered the Grizzlies, I witnessed DeLon Wright put up like 2 or 3 triple-doubles towards the end of the year. So like stuff just happens in like March and April. And 3, I could just see Kevin Knox at some point getting some run because they want to see what they have in them. And I did a little bit of research on it. He had, I believe, 11 games as a rookie with at least 20 points. One of those games was a 30-point game. His career high is 31. He has not scored 20 points since. So he did it like 2018-19 as a rookie. Has not had a 20-point game since. And Detroit's the city where dreams are made of. I just think it happens.
That 2018-19 Knicks was maybe the worst team in NBA history, Omari. I had to go back and watch those games whenever they got Kevin Knox, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is bad. People complain about what we have to watch with the Pistons at times right now, and I'm not a Knicks hater. I'm sure I'm going to get hate for this, but that team was awful. But he did look like the best player in the Rico Hines footage. So who knows? They get into stuff like you're saying, some of those March, April games where they're glorified pick. I mean, Killian dropped like a 30-point triple-double against the Thunder last season. So who knows? Wes, what do you think? 25 points for Kevin Knox this year?
I'm going to pause real quick and just say, Bryce, like I think very few people are more committed to just player analysis and just a game of basketball than you are. So I don't think anybody would ever question your commitment because you're like top team when it comes to it. But if anyone ever questions it, just say you watched the 2018-19 Knicks to evaluate what Kevin Knox brings to the Pistons. And that should squash any questions about your commitment to this because that's a little different.
Respect. I appreciate it. Wes, 25-point game for Kevin Knox.
Oh, my gut says no, but the only thing I'll give to it is maybe if injuries happen. I mean, Hami didn't he have a 40-point game last year during that COVID stretch? Weird things happen. Maybe.
Yeah, he was also like one of 2 healthy players. It was like him and Luka Garza.
Micah Potter.
So who knows?
All right, Wes, you got your number 3, final one here. Well, I know you have a 4th one. We may be able to throw that out as well, but your 3rd one.
All right, I'm just out on the island of bold takes this one. So Jaden Ivey averages more points per game this season than Cade did last year. Bold.
I mean, Omari, the smile on Omari's face. Omari, we can't say anything. Like, we're locked in at this point. We can't go back on what we said. And so
this is how I separate myself from you guys.
I was going to say, everything he said negatively, I just want everybody to remember what he said about Sadiq Bey. I want everybody to remember what he said about Isaiah Stewart. And this doesn't atone for those comments. But he's going to get all the love now, Omari, for that.
Cade Cunningham averaged 17.4 points per game last season. If Jaden Ivey averages more than that this season, Wes, you could have my spot on the podcast. I will retire. I'll retire for like an episode to just let you have, like, you can spot off all the hot takes you want because clearly you're Nostradamus and I need to reevaluate my hot takes. That's a great one. I love that.
Is he winning Rookie of the Year, right? Because Cade averaged that last year and didn't win it. Is Ivy winning Rookie of the Year, Wes, with those points per game?
If he puts up more than 17.5, yeah, I think so.
Jalen Green averaged 17.3 because I know he was like just a tick under Cade. And I would have to go back and look at like the history of rookies averaging like at least 17 a game because obviously that's a pretty lofty point total, even for like a number 1 pick. I mean, we've had rookies average 20 or whatever, but it doesn't always happen. I like that. That is a bold prediction.
We said bold.
That's bold. It's bold. Like, I don't have any that is like that. I feel like I need to change what I have for the 3rd one because it is not bold enough. Like, you have completely owned the prompt here of like bold predictions. My predictions are not bold enough. So
I don't even want to say mine now because it's so boring. Yeah. Like my last one is Killian Hayes solidifies himself as the 2nd unit point guard. Like, that's my bold prediction. Reasonable. He doesn't get traded. I guess is it hard for me to not be reasonable? I don't know. Like, I feel like people don't think I'm reasonable whenever I'm just talking, and then now I'm supposed to do bold predictions, and all I can be is reasonable. Like, that's what I think is going to happen this year. I think Killian Hayes solidifies himself as the 2nd unit point guard, and there's nothing fun about that. So I should have said he got traded at the deadline, but I don't believe that will happen. This is not my game. Kind of like Sheet or Sham. I suck at every game you create, Wes. Omari, do you have a good one? Wes has another good one. So if you don't want to go, Wes can finish us off.
I have one. I'm going to go for one a little bit bolder. But
Omari's making him up on the spot now.
I'm going to say Jalen Duren has a 2020 game.
No, I like it.
This is true. Again, this is March, right? So there's no shutdown. Isaiah Stewart's not shut down, but maybe he's only playing 24 minutes or whatever. It's like against Oklahoma City Thunder. So, some D3 guys playing center or whatever. I don't know. I can see it. I can see the stars aligning to where Jalen Duren just sounds like the perfect matchup, and he just feasts. So, Jalen Duren 2020 game. I don't even know if the Pistons have a game this day because I don't have a schedule in front of me. I'm just say March 12th, 2023. Jalen Duren goes off with 21 points and 20 rebounds and like 2 blocks in 38 minutes.
If you correctly predicted that, you can do a podcast all by yourself. I will retire for a single episode, Omari, and you can shine for 60 minutes while I set it up.
I can't talk to myself for 60 minutes. What?
Well, you're talking to the audience. You're not talking to yourself. All right, Wes, give your last one while I look up this No game on March 12th, Omari. They play on the 11th and the 13th.
Pick which one.
Both of them at home against the Pacers.
Sure. They will probably have traded Miles Turner by then. So I'm sticking with it.
That could be an ultimate tanking team at that point in the season.
All right. I love it. Let's do that.
All right. Very good. Lock it down. Wes, you've been really good at this. You take us home with the last one.
Last bold prediction. Hamidou Diallo's traded before the deadline. Don't know what for.
And is he the trade or is it like a package deal?
I've got no opinion on that.
All right, vote. I like it.
Wes, he traded him by himself. I've read his little notes. It doesn't say anything about as part of a package deal. He realized he messed up with Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart, so he's trying to keep this one a little bit more positive. Yeah, walk it back a little bit. I don't think that's crazy. I think there's a chance if he's it will be interesting, right? Like, what do they do with him if he's completely out of the rotation? I don't know what his value would be. But you would think you'd want to get him somewhere where he has a chance to play. And I think there's a real possibility he's not in the rotation, Omari. Not consistently anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it, but they need shooting at the wing spots, especially when you have 3 guards who have not been proven to shoot at the NBA level with Cade, Killian, and Ivy. So I think if 2 of those guys can shoot really well, you could have a role for Hami. But I think you just need some shooting in the backcourt, and that does kind of hurt Hami through no fault of his own because he's good enough to play. So we just have to see on that. But I do think that just from a shooting math standpoint, it could be tough.
All right, guys, we got Oklahoma City on Tuesday for preseason game number 3, the Memphis Grizzlies on Thursday for preseason and final game number 4, and then the season opener versus the Orlando Magic on October 19th, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Home opener that night as well. I'm sure it'll be a packed house at Little Caesars. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. We'll be back again next week. Wes, thanks for jumping on with us. This was fun. We got to get you on more often. Omari, take it away, my guy.
Big thanks to our editor, Kerry Jr. II, who so helpfully sent me a photo of the proper settings for my mic. So hopefully my audio is better this episode. Our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado. Our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford. And then shout out to the People's Champ, Wes Davenport, who predicted Jaden Ivey would have one of the best rookie seasons in recent memory. We'll talk to you all next week.